Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Stephanie, and I have included just at the beginning of this practice my pup, Rosie. So 3 weeks ago on this chain of YouTube videos, I had Rosie featured at the beginning of one of the videos, and some of you were asking to see her and get an idea of how she looks. So here she is. She's getting bigger. She's currently teething because she's a puppy, and I'm going to give her a treat. Here, Rosie. Rosie, do you want to have a treat? There you go. Good girl. So rest assured, we're not doing puppy yoga. We're going to start with doing some stretches for our hips and our back. And Rosie's going to leave off of this frame in a few moments. But fittingly, we're going to start with a pose called downward facing dog. So bringing yourself up, coming up, and onto your mat. Hands are shoulder distance apart, knees are bent. To start with, you can curl your toes under and then start to lift the legs up in the air and start to pedal out, stretching out the backs of your legs. Taking some breaths, just starting to loosen things up. Now, of course, if you don't feel that great being in downward facing dog, you can always take a tabletop position and just move your hips from side to side. This is always an alternative if you have sore wrists or you just don't feel that your shoulders will help support you well in downward dog. So we'll do this for a few more moments. I want you to keep breathing as you either pedal out your legs in downward dog or as you're shifting your hips from side to side in your tabletop position. Okay, we'll take one more breath. I'm going to move back into downward dog. And whether you are in tabletop or you're in downward dog, I'd like you to bring yourself into a standing forward fold. So your knees can be very bent, that's okay, I'll turn this way. Your knees can be quite bent. You're just allowing your head to release. You can give your head and your neck some gentle shakes, shake out your shoulders. I want you to be feeling a lot of pull and stretch in the backs of the legs. You're very likely feeling it in your low back as well. Let's do this another breath, for another breath. And then keeping your belly muscles engaged, I want you to start to roll yourself up nice and slow, bone by bone, bringing yourself all the way up to a standing position. And you can take a couple of breaths, maybe straighten out your shirt, fix your hair, whatever you need to do. Just make sure that you feel good, you don't feel dizzy. And we're going to come into a pretty deep hip stretch right off the bat from a standing position. I want you to set your feet wider apart, wider than hip distance. You're going to turn your toes outward, and we're going to start to sink down, bending the knees, bending them outward, coming into horse stance or goddess pose, and just really breathing into those hips. So if you've been sitting quite a bit at your desk, maybe you're newly working from home, you're not used to this, this is a good way to get into those tight hips and back. So holding our pose a little bit longer if you can. Always come up and release if you need to. I want you to just make sure that your knees are tracking more away from your big toes. And we'll do one more thing. We'll just take the arms and we'll stretch them into eagle arms. You can always do something like this if that's more comfortable. Holding here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we'll straighten out the legs and we'll release the arms, give everything a little shake. And we're going to do that one more time. Sinking back down, nice and easy. Trying to keep your spine straight. So I'm going to show you a side view this time. So you're not sitting here with your butt sticking out to the best of your ability. You're trying to keep your spine straight. You're trying to open up your knees. Remember, your toes are pointing outward. Holding here. It's going to maybe feel a little more difficult this second time around because your legs are more fatigued, but that's okay. You know we're almost done. We're going to take the arms and I want you to put the opposite arm under this time, or crossing. Nice big breath. Always adding in a little stretch for the shoulders and the arms while we work on the hips. So for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll straighten up the legs again. Release the arms. Give yourself a couple nice big breaths of air, and then we'll give ourselves a little brightening swing here. You can swing your arms gently from side to side. You might feel some tingly sensations in your legs. Okay. Let's come back down to the ground and either set ourselves back up into a tabletop position like we were doing before, maybe pushing the hips from side to side, or you can go back up into downward facing dog. We're going to do this for 3 more breaths. Wherever you're at, you can be pedaling out the legs, drawing your abdominal muscles in, lifting up your tailbone nice and high. 1 more breath. And then let's lower down, coming down to our knees. And we're going to actually have the big toes touching, knees are nice and wide, and bring yourself down into child's pose. So we're going to take some breaths. Let's walk our hands over to the right side. And then we'll walk our hands over to the left side. And we'll come back to center. And we'll stay here for 2 more breaths. Okay, we're going to bring ourselves back up. We're going to come onto our hands and our knees, and we'll just give ourselves a chance to stretch out our legs. So just stretch your right leg back. And we'll do the same with the left leg. And we're going to move into some lunges. So I want you to take your one leg forward, it doesn't matter which one, right or left, but you're going to make sure that you have your knee over the ankle. So I don't want you to be like this, and I definitely don't want you to be looking like this. That can hurt your knee. So you have your knee over the ankle, you have your opposite leg stretched back, and we're just going to stay here in this nice deep low lunge. Now, I didn't mention at the beginning of this video that you needed props, but if you have soup cans or books, and if you prefer to use them, you can certainly have them here and bring them underneath your hands so that you, maybe it's helping to support you in that distance to the ground lessens a little bit. And that just is a support that we can use to be able to stay in this pose until one day things open up a bit more and we're able to touch the ground. Let's take another breath. And then we're going to stretch out that leg, make it nice and long. Again, you can have your props here underneath your hands. Just give your foot a couple pedals. And we are going to switch sides. So, opposite foot comes forward. So these low lunges really help to release the tightness in the hips, in the glutes, in your hip flexors, the tops of your thighs. All of these tight areas can contribute to back pain, even pain that radiates up into the more of the upper back area. So we're always trying to take nice deep breaths. We'll stay here for 2 more breaths. And releasing out this leg, stretching it out. Again, like before, you can do a couple pedals of your foot. And we'll slide the leg back. Now, we can do kind of like a clearing pose here, so you can push your hips from side to side. And we're going to get back into another lunge variation. So going back to the first leg. Now this one is called lizard pose. In lizard pose, we try to have both hands inside the foot, and I want you to step your foot that's bent, the foot that's stepped forward, I want you to walk it a little further away from the center of the mat. So you're trying to walk it to the outside edge of the mat. And it feels like you're getting this big, big pull on the inside of your hip. If you're able to, you can roll to the outside edge of your foot. You can stay like this, or again, you might have your props, or some of you might come down to your forearms. And again, we're going to use our deep breathing to try and release the tightness in the hips. So our hips didn't just get tight overnight. It's accumulation of years of sitting, of chronic repetitive, or not chronic, but repetitive movement that wears down the joint. It's many different reasons for the tightness, but we are trying here today to give some relief by taking these stretches in sequence. We're going to do one more breath. And we're going to start to bring the knee back up. You can wiggle the foot back to center. We'll do that same releasing pose that we did before. You can pedal a few times. And slide the leg back. And we'll do the opposite leg. So you're going to step the foot forward. You're going to bring both hands inside the foot. Walk your foot more to the outside edge of the mat. Decide how this feels. Give yourself a couple of breaths here. It's a really big pull, and you have to kind of stay with it, using your breath to keep yourself motivated to be able to remain in this pose. It's not easy to do this. We're going to again see if we can come to the outside edge of the foot. If it's too much, then bring your foot back. And then some of you may feel like you want to come down onto a forearm or both forearms. We're going to stay here a little bit longer. I think it's always good to try to get yourself to a point in a stretch where it feels like a challenge. But if you feel like you get to the point in a stretch where you are only able to breathe in short pants, or you can barely breathe, or you just know intuitively that the pain that you're feeling is not right, go with your gut, of course, and just ease out. And I would much rather that you are able to hold a pose for a longer period of time than struggling to move into a deeper variation of a pose and just holding it for less time. So we'll take one more breath, and we'll start to bring the foot back. You can walk it back to center, one hand either side, stretch out the leg, give it a few pedals. And then we'll bring the right leg back, or the leg back, and I want you to push your hips from side to side again. I always think of these poses as wiping a blackboard clean, so to speak. It's like you're clearing everything between one pose to the next. And then from here, let's move into child's pose. Send your hips back. You might notice that you feel a little bit more open than you did earlier with your child's pose. You can stay like this, or if you'd rather, come up into downward facing dog. And we'll just pedal out the legs. And we'll take 2 more breaths, whether you are in downward dog or child's pose. Okay, we're going to come down to our knees this time, and we'll take a pose called hero pose. So this is a big stretch in the quads, moving up into the hip flexors. So if you start in this and it's too much for your knees, then you'll stop. But if you are able to, you're going to try to sit down on your heels. And again, you reassess if this is available to you or not. You'll come up if you can't handle it anymore. If you're able to stay here a little bit longer, you can bring your hands behind you maybe. Maybe you're staying like this. we're just going to try and hold here. Let's try for a count of 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll release. We'll come back up and we'll stretch one leg back and stretch the other leg back. And from here, we're going to completely switch around, and I want you to come into a wide-legged seated fold, a wide-legged seated position, and we're going to take a fold. So you're in a wide-legged position, and it's in a way that feels comfortable for you, in a way that you're able to sit up and be able to keep your spine straight. If you need to bring your hands behind you, you can. I want you to try to keep your toes pointing up, and we're just going to dip ourselves forward, walk ourselves forward any amount that you can. So you're likely feeling a very deep stretch in the undersides of the legs, all behind the knee, your calf muscles, certainly your hamstrings, but you're also getting into your hips. We're going to stay here for one more breath. And then we'll walk ourselves back up. I want you to take one leg and bend it in. Your foot can be touching the inside of the opposite leg. Turn towards your extended leg and just fold yourself forward as much as you can. So we're thinking here more about trying to stretch forward and shine the heart forward than we are about trying to touch our nose to our knee. But we're trying to get this big stretch here in the outside hip, radiates up into your low back, releasing tightness. Let's stay here for one more breath. And we'll come back up and let's completely switch. So extend opposite leg out, bring other one back in, turn your body towards the stretched out leg and bring yourself forward every amount that you can. And you're taking nice big breaths. Let's try and take 2 more breaths in this position. And we'll come back up and we'll do one last stretch forward, both legs out once again, toes pointing towards the ceiling once again, and fold yourself forward any amount that you can. Maybe you find you're able to move in a little more deeply this time, maybe not. It doesn't matter, because if you feel it, you are doing it. So I'm going to count us down here for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come all the way back up. And we'll bring our legs together. You can give them a little shake. Okay. We're going to do a pose called half pigeon, sometimes known as pigeon. I'm going to suggest it. You can try it, but if it doesn't work for you, I want you just to skip over this part because the next pose after this will be one that hopefully everybody can do. Pigeon is a great pose, but if the hips are really tight or if there's knee issues, it's not the right pose, but you can skip over this part. So we're going to come onto our hands and our knees. I want you to take your right knee, slide it up to your right wrist. You're going to stretch back through your left leg. Your knee is on the ground. That's very important. The top of the foot is on the ground. You can start to shift your front shin. So maybe it's lining up more with the top edge of the mat to whatever degree you're able to have your leg. And actually, I'm just going to switch sides as well so you can see it from the other angle. I'm still on the same leg. So this is a big stretch into the glute muscle. You can feel it into your hip, of course, across the back. If you're able to, you can start to lower down. I just realized the dog toys are still in the video. So perhaps coming down onto your forearms. Maybe some of you come down onto stacked fists. Maybe you have a pillow in front of you and you want to lie your head on the pillow. These are all options. A pillow or a rolled up blanket. So we're going to stay here for 3 more breaths if you can. Remember, of course, for those that have knee and hip issues, there's a difference between having that white hot pain that you know is not good versus having the discomfort of moving into a tight stretch. So you'll skip over this pose if you're feeling the white hot pain. Let's take 1 more breath. And we'll bring ourselves back up. You can start to climb yourself back up. And I always like to, again, come into a tabletop and move the hips around, just recirculating the body from that position you were just holding. Or, of course, you can come up into downward facing dog. So we'll take another breath. And we'll come back down to our knees, and we're going to do the left side. So left knee will slide up to the left wrist. Stretch back through your right leg. Your kneecap and the top of the foot are on the ground, and you're also trying to bring your foot in more to the middle of the mat as opposed to having it splayed over to the right. So it's drawn in more to the midline of the mat. You're going to adjust your shin and lowering down. So I'm not flipping around this time to show you the view on the other side because hopefully you know it. So nice big deep breaths. You're going to continuously try to take air in through your nose and out through your nose. I talk about this to my classes, but the hips are kind of like the basement or the garage, where you might just throw stuff that you don't know what to do with anymore. You don't need, but you just don't want to throw it out. You just chuck it in there and it stays there for years and years, and one day you come in and you're like, what is all this? That's kind of what the hips are in the body in the context of our emotions. All of our emotions just go into the hips. We chuck them in there, they stay there, and then when we do things like stretch, they come out. So it's very normal that when you're in deep hip stretches, you might have all sorts of feelings come up. Happiness, anger, sadness, it's very normal. But you want that. You want to release from the body. Okay, we're going to take 1 more breath. And start to climb yourself back up, just like we did on the other side. Maybe starting first with some tentative movements in a tabletop position, and then eventually maybe coming up into downward facing dog, pedaling up the legs. Okay, now I promised that if the pigeon pose wasn't right for you, that if you waited and fast forwarded, you get to the pose that is more clickable. So we're going to do a supine pigeon, or sometimes we call this thread the needle. Lying down on your back, and we'll go back to the right leg, take the right ankle, cross it over the left thigh, reach in between your legs and grab your thigh, your left thigh. So you always want to keep your foot flexed. That helps protect your knee. But this pose is just a lot more accessible for many of us that have the tight hips or knee issues, or even low back issues. This pose has a lot more comfort built into it. It's still a really effective position though. You can make it a little bit deeper by doing things like trying to grab onto your shin as opposed to the thigh. You can also take a hand, and as you push your knee away from you, simultaneously pull your opposite leg in, so you have this push and pull happening. It really gives you a much deeper stretch. We'll take 1 more breath, and then we're just going to release. Bring your feet flat to the ground. Just drop your knees from side to side. We'll just do that one time on either side, and then we'll come back. to our supine pigeon or thread the needle on the other leg. So I always encourage people to try to press their back into the ground and think about when you're in this pose, trying to stretch out your tailbone. So you're trying to lengthen your spine and push and lengthen out your tailbone. And again, remembering to breathe, try not to clench your teeth. But definitely a really, really lovely stretch to take if you've been sitting for a long time. Okay, we will take one more breath. And just gently release your leg. Again, we'll have our feet wide on the mat, drop your knees from side to side. This time we'll do it a couple more times. So we'll say 4 times in total. And we will come back to center. I want you to bring your knees into your chest. You can grab onto the outside edges of your feet. Take a really great pose for your hips. This is Happy Baby. If this is not accessible to you, if grabbing the outside edges of the feet is not available, you can certainly grab onto the underneath the knees and just pull the legs nice and wide. You can even keep your hands on the knees. And if it feels good, you can rock from side to side. Just thinking about how you have put a bunch of space in your body, in your hips. And we'll bring our feet flat to the ground. We're going to close off with butterfly pose, a supine butterfly pose. Bring the soles of your feet together. Let your knees open out to the sides. You can just rest your hands on your belly. And if you're able to, just close your eyes. Maybe staying here for 30 more seconds, maybe a minute if you can, but just trying to stay here in a little bit of peaceful silence and just letting your hips stretch out for one more little bit. So thank you so much for joining me today, and namaste.